The modern NBA is a shooter's league. Of last season's top 10 scorers, 38% of all field goal attempts came from three-point range. Compare this to the top scorers in the iconic 90s era, where three-point attempts accounted for just 12.4% of shots taken from the field, and you can see just how dramatically the game has changed. This stark contrast often leads to debates as to how 90s stars, well, one guy specifically, would fare today, and how modern shooters would fare in the more physical game back then. As incomparable as the two periods are, there is perhaps one player who would best bridge the gap. You may have spotted him on that table back there. With over 34% of his shots coming from behind the arc in the 90s, Reggie Miller was one of the first stars to implement high-volume three-point shooting as the team's lead scorer, demonstrating to a three-point shy league that this was a viable offensive style for franchise players and competing teams. Though his career average of 4.7 trade attempts per game barely seems noteworthy today, after all Giannis Antetokounmpo averaged the same last season, Miller was doing this over a span where entire teams averaged just 11.9 three-point attempts per game. Of course, we probably wouldn't be talking about him had these attempts not been hitting the target, and the thing about Reggie is that he was a deadeye, averaging just shy of 40% for his career three-point attempts and sinking 88.8% of his free throws to boot. A member of the 50-40-90 club for his exploits in the 93-94 season, and a guy who spent 10 different seasons amongst the top 5 for three-pointers made, Reggie Miller is widely regarded as one of the greatest shooters the game has ever seen. Selected by the Indiana Pacers with the 11th pick, Miller emerged as the franchise leader in the 1989-90 season, just his third year in the league. From that point forward, he'd gradually put himself amongst the league's elite, truly cementing his place there by making 5 conference finals over a 7-year stretch beginning in 1994. Much of this period of his career would come to be defined by a rivalry with New York and a series of last-gasp plays which earned him a reputation as the league's most clutch player behind Michael Jordan. Key to this was an impossible feat in Game 1 against the Knicks in 1995. With just 18.7 seconds left to overturn a 6-point deficit, Miller somehow scored 8 points in 9 seconds of game time, resulting in a spectacular snatch-and-grab win for the Pacers. Despite clearly having the attributes to go ring-chasing with other franchises, Reggie Miller stuck by the team that drafted him for the length of his career. As the small-market Indiana struggled to attract championship-caliber talent and had to instead rely on player development, this ultimately meant that Reggie spent most of his career, and definitely most of his prime years, without a bona fide second star. Reggie's Pacers nearly always existed as underdogs and would continue to drop agonizingly short of their coveted championship, regularly getting edged out by larger market teams with significantly more star power. Most notably, this included Patrick Ewing and Charles Oakley's Knicks in 1994, Shaq and Penny's Magic in 95, and Jordan and Pippen's Bulls in 98, all of whom beat the Pacers over 7 games in the conference finals. In 2000, the Pacers managed to finally get past the conference finals, only to run into Shaq and Kobe at the launch of their dynasty. Arguably, Reggie's best chance came in his final 2 seasons, when Indiana's roster also boasted eventual 6-time All-Star Jermaine O'Neal and Defensive Player of the Year Ron Artest. Unfortunately for the top-seeded Pacers, they'd be upset in 2004's conference finals by the third-placed Pistons, who themselves pushed on to take that year's championship. The Pacers' hopes to run it back and go again in Reggie's final year were then damaged just 7 games into the next season, following an ugly road game in Detroit. The infamous Malice at the Palace, a brawl involving players and fans, led to Ron Artest being suspended for the entirety of the season. The Pacers would still make the playoffs, but fell to the Pistons yet again in the second round. With just 15 seconds remaining in a Game 6 that the Pacers had already lost, Reggie Miller was taken off for the last time to a standing ovation from both the Indianapolis crowd and the Detroit Pistons bench, a gesture which acted to ease the animosity between the two franchises. Given his loyalty to the Pacers, it is unsurprising that Reggie Miller remains Indiana's icon, leading the franchise for games played, points, assists, and steals amongst many other categories. The league's all-time leader in three-pointers made and attempted when he retired, Miller has since been overtaken. What won't change, however, is his spot in the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, which will continue to stand testament to the undeniable role Reggie played in shaping today's game.
A new year means new beginnings. It's the perfect time to introduce our newest segment, the OG series. And who better to start with than the original OG, the sniper down in Indiana, the Knick Killer, Mr. Reggie Miller. Look, BJ, I want to allude to you because this is your era, and this is perfect time to lean on you as our OG on this show. And we turn around and ask you to give us the insight into the 90s. What was it like playing against Reggie, especially those iconic battles that you guys would have?
You know, Reggie was a consummate professional. And I remember when this young kid came into this league, and, Reggie and I, we shared the same agent. And for many of us playing in that era, we had a deep appreciation for what he was able to do on and off the court. And this young man was, without question, one of the great shooters of that era. There were so many wonderful players, but Reggie really brought a unique spin to the game because he was shooting and he was taking advantage of the three-point line. He wasn't a great ball handler. He wasn't a great passer, but he established what he could do and really took the game and created space on the floor. They had another player on their team I thought that Reggie Miller really benefited from playing with, and that was Rick Smits, the dunking Dutchman. And why was that important? Because back then the game was played from the inside out. So Reggie Miller had a guy who he could throw the ball into, but more importantly, it became a great lethal combination because they had an inside-outside threat, and then you sprinkled in all the other things around him. Reggie was clutch. Reggie performed when the lights were bright, and he always took big shots. And I had the ultimate and the utmost respect for him because he always took on his matchup, not only on the offensive end, which, you see a lot of players do, and that's acceptable today, but he took that matchup on the other end. He had to guard the Clyde Drexlers, the Joe Dumars, the Michael Jordan, so forth and so on, when that position was just loaded with scores night in and night out. And Reggie Miller, he stood out amongst the best of the best. So, he was a pro. He had a phenomenal career. And also one thing is, guys, he stuck with his one team his entire career. You don't see that often, but Reggie Miller did it, and he did it in a small market.